This is a Now Magazine podcast.
Hello and welcome to Now What? I'm Reddy Anti-Play, Now Magazine acting editor and the host of this podcast. And today we're talking to Devery Jacobs in what I guess could be considered the first of our film festival podcasts. Not really, but sort of, because Devery Jacobs, she's in a show called Reservation Dogs. She's not only she's not only in the show, she also writes for the show in its second season. The second season has already been coming out in the US on Hulu. It's on its way to Canada September 7th on Disney+. I got to talk to Devery about Reservation Dogs, about the episode she co-wrote. That's episode 4, which was also directed by Toronto director Danis Goulet. And I also got to touch on her film, This Place. It's the film that she stars in opposite Priya Guns, and it's co-written by Devery along with a trio of other writers, and it's directed by V.T. Nayani, and it will be premiering at the Toronto Film Festival. So I guess just by mentioning that, this becomes a Toronto Film Festival podcast episode. In any case, here is our conversation with Devery Jacobs.
Hey, long time no see.
I know. So where are you right now? I feel bad if you're in LA and 7 a.m. and you're talking to me.
No, I'm on East Coast time. I'm in Atlanta. I'm shooting the first season of Marvel's Echo series.
Ooh, that's exciting.
Yeah,
you know. When are we gonna see that? Are you allowed to tell me what power you have?
Well, we don't know if I have a power, and all of that is like there's not a lot that I can talk about with that, right. But it's one that I've been working on for the past little while. I'm getting to work with Sydney Freeland again, who we had worked together on Rutherford Falls and then Reservation Dogs, and now this is like our third project back to back, which is really unexpected.
Yeah.
But it's been really awesome and so exciting, and I can't wait to be able to give more info out, but I'm sworn to secrecy.
That's fine. We got so much to talk about. I don't want to. Let's not get bogged down now with that. Then look. Let's get into Res Dogs season 2. I mean, you know how much I love this show. Okay. First season was so groundbreaking, so affectionate, so I loved it. It was a bomb. And then now I got to see the first 4 episodes of the new season.
Awesome.
And I just want to dive right into. So the 4th episode, I didn't even get the credit, so I don't know who made it, who wrote it, who directed it.
So that episode was the one that I co-wrote with Sterling, and it was directed by Danis Goulet.
Oh my God! Of course it was. I didn't want to make the assumption and then be disappointed, but okay. So let me tell you how much I love this episode. Okay, this is absolutely fucking blown away by this episode because so just to describe this to our audiences, this is an episode where the community gathers together as someone is passing, and it's just so beautiful. So talk to me about it. Ease us into what's going on here.
Totally. In episode 4 of season 2, titled Mabel, we learn that Elora Danon's grandmother is dying, and this isn't a spoiler because episode 3's already come out, and so that was kind of the end hook to the third episode. But in episode 4, we get to see the community all come back together and surround Elora and surround Mabel, and as she's making her journey. And when we were in the writer's room, I guess I was just really passionate about the story, and I was basically more involved with everybody else's storylines, I want to say. I was not anticipating writing for Elora, and when Sterling was divvying out episodes on who would be writing what, because I was so passionate about growing up in my community and going to funerals and going to wakes, and it being a radically different experience around death than in Western cultures, because in Western cultures, I find I've only been to a few funerals, but it feels very cold and detached and somber and closed casket, very taboo, hush hush, and everybody mourns in isolated silence, it seems, which is just the antithesis to our communities and around death. And obviously, there's exceptions when people have passed before their time. Stories like Daniel and traumatic experiences like that all of our communities have faced. But when somebody's going at their time and when it's time for them to make their journey, that it's honestly some of the best times. there'll be family members and community members around at all hours, and it's like it's a really beautiful hands-on experience for us. And like I was so passionate about that when we were in the writers room, and getting a chance to show that in our series, that Serlin ended up giving me the episode to co-write with him, and I was like, oh my god, now I have to write for my character. And it was really intimidating, but Danis Goulet, who's directed it, has just done such an incredible job. And it was such a it was such a respectful process between the both of us as creatives on this. And before we shot, I told her, like, I trust you thoroughly. And so I am switching hats over from writer to actor, and I trust you with these words. And I am really excited to see your vision come to life, and getting to see the 4th episode and how much care she put into its direction, and how much care she put into honoring the words that we wrote on the page. I'm just so grateful for her. She's so incredible as a person and also as a filmmaker. And it was just like, it's an episode that I'm so proud of as a writer and an actor.
Yeah. And look, okay, what I love about this episode, I mean, on top of kind of getting that feel for how you grieve, how it doesn't have to be like as rigid as a lot of us experience it. On top of that, it reminded me of Steve McQueen's Lover's Rock. Have you seen that? The second part of his Small Axe?
I haven't.
Well, I mean, so the beauty of that one is like, so it's my favorite of his Lover's Rock series. I mean, sorry, of his Small Axe series. And it's simply a Jamaican house party. It's a big community party. It's dance hall. It's sexy vibes. But you get like what you get here is you have this community gathering, and you have all the vibes, but you also get a feel for the relationships, like the intricacies of the relationships. You get some of the tensions and the glances and the movements. You get so much about what's going on inside the characters from little gestures and that's what I saw here. Right? You got like there's still it's like the log line seems kind of basic, like they're just gathered to mourn, but there's just so much emotion, so many more feelings gathered here. I mean, like is that something you thought of as you were writing this, like in terms of how do you get how do you complicate the characters' emotional lives in a situation that kind of could seem like just a celebration?
I mean, that's something that I love diving into as a writer, is making sure that like we as an audience can understand where everybody's at and what they're going through, but doing it in that subtle way where we're not like having a monologue about it necessarily. And so it was just like a beautiful opportunity to see the community come together, and all of the characters we know and love, and also some new characters where Alora gets to meet Teeny, who is her aunt who grew up in the city, who is best friends with her mom Cookie before she passed, and dealing with the anger and loss of having this person who Alora could have benefited growing up around, but also still admiring her in a way, and seeing for the first time somebody who is still connected to community while also having left. And one of the things that was really interesting for us in the writer's room to explore was showing what the Res Dogs are going through, where one of their friends passes away by suicide, and the fracture that it has on their friend group, and how that impacts each of them, Alora wanting to flee and run away, and then for Alora to see that with Teeny, for Alora to see that with the older generation of their friend group, Cookie, with Teeny, with Rita, with Big, with even Coach Bobson had known them. And so it kind of is like potentially history repeating itself, and Alora really gets to take in what her future could look like should she choose to stay away, with everybody's feelings involved. So it was just something that that we have experienced ourselves in all of our communities, being the next generation coming up and passing that torch down. And yeah, all of the dynamics, all of the relationships, and everything in between in such a place like the passing of someone's grandmother.
I mean, that cyclical kind of realization was like, I mean, it hit like a gut punch. So you guys just totally delivered in this episode, of course, and not just this episode. Okay, like I mean, like this whole series. First of all, I want us to note like that. This season you feel more confident and assured in dealing with the heavier emotions, like going with the morning full frontal and not having to constantly not leaning on comedy as much. Like I just feel like there's so much more confidence in like dealing with the big emotions. And one thing, I mean, we were talking about episode 4. I want to talk about episode 2 for a second, because like, when you begin that episode 2, it has this incredible journey, because it starts with y'all running away from hillbillies, right? It's like you try to steal a car in a desperate situation. Your character Alora, Dannon, and Jackie they try to steal this car because they have to get to, like, I mean, the circumstances put them in that position, and then they have these hillbillies chasing them down with a shotgun. And of course, it's played tonally in a sort of jokey or like kind of like like adventurous manner, but is that to cushion how traumatic the reality of that situation is? Because it immediately made me think of Colton Bushi, whose death was kind of justified by the law because of some minor trespass.
Yeah, I mean, it's when we were filming. Also, I'll backtrack actually. When we were writing the season, I think that like we as writers were surprised with what we ended up with. Which I think was then in turn ends up making it surprising to the audience. And one of those ideas was Sterling's, where he had actually had a whole feature with these 2 runaways and had kind of like implemented it into this series. And one of the parts about Reservation Dogs that I love so much and being a part of it so much is that we can kind of do anything. We can kind of tell whichever story from our communities that we want, because this is a bit, even though it's a comedy, like there is room for all genres in it, because that's how our communities operate. We weave between comedy and tragedy or adventure with some teasing jokes thrown in. And I think that was an example of that. I don't know that we were actively making a comment on Colton Bushi and his experience and his family's loss. But it's definitely something that hits close to home and is something that we can all relate to, being like little shit kids who are at the end of their rope and are desperately trying to reach out to get away or to do something, and being met with people like that.
What I love about the journey of episode 2 is, okay, it kind of, I mean, you like that, those tragic events are kind of come to mind in the opening, but then you go on to show people who are more charitable to these kids, like the woman who, maybe annoying, but she doesn't try to run and call the police on Alora, Dan, and Jackie. And also it circles back to, at the end of this episode, it circles back to the first season with the guys where you stole the chip truck from. And they're like, no, we didn't want you in police custody. They didn't have that punitive sense. They didn't want the kids to go through the system. There's more of a sense of healing and community represented in that same episode. It's like a journey from the worst to like to the people who can actually be tender, or like the best example of how to handle that situation. Like, so were you aware of that, of this episode being, was that kind of engineered to be that?
I mean, I think that's all part of it. And like, as somebody who, before acting full time, I used to work at the Native Women's Shelter of Montreal, and also being in my community and so on, that like there's an understanding that calling the police is kind of a last resort because of its implications of what it means for our community members. And I think that's one of the elements in the first 2 episodes of Res Dogs is Miles like being like, yeah, you were being a shit ass and I wanted to make you feel bad and I hope that it worked. And Bear being lucky enough to be given that chance. I mean, again, like we all mapped out the season together. But those first 2 episodes were like intricately woven by Sterling, by Dallas Goldtooth, who plays Spirit. He was a writer on the season as well, and by Ryan Redcorn.
Amazing. So I just want to, one last thing, like, so I watched This Place.
Oh, you have?
I did.
Finally.
Finally, remember our first
Finally
cover
out.
story? We talked about it 4 years ago, and now
Yes.
I finally saw it. And you know, I think the connective tissue when you talk about Reservation Dogs and you talk about a story like This Place is these are stories that are told from community. You know, it's like it doesn't feel like a single artist kind of telling their story. It feels like a community's coming together to tell a story in both Reservation Dogs and This Place. I mean, did you see that connection in terms of the stories that are being told and or the process behind them?
I mean, yeah, absolutely. Like both This Place and Reservation Dogs were such collaborative efforts and were very much about communities coming together. On Reservation Dogs, obviously it's all Indigenous writers from different corners of Turtle Island, but for This Place it was more of a cross between like a cross collaboration and communion between different cultures, and that being those of refugees, the Tamil and Iranian communities, and the Ganyagahaga and Mohawk communities. And it's a film that could only ever take place in a city like Toronto. And it was definitely like a 5-year labor of love at the micro budget level. But I'm just so thrilled that it's able to premiere at TIFF this year, and it's one that I'm so proud to be a part of.
And that is it for our conversation with Devery Jacobs. Make sure you read more about Devery and Reservation Dogs online at nowtoronto.com. I mean, we dedicated 2 cover stories to this show already with DeFaro Wunatai and Paulina Alexis, Devery's co-stars. Also, keep up with our TIFF coverage. We're just getting started. This is just the first of many podcasts that touch on what's going to be at the film festival. So once again, nowtoronto.com and also on our social media at nowtoronto. Until next time.